Hello everyone, welcome to Live Interactive English. I'm Mike.
I'm Rainbow.
And today, in our culture unit, we're not looking at something most people would kind of go, oh yeah, that's interesting culture.
Yeah.
Often when we think of culture, we think of arts and, music, food, religion, language, stuff like that. How about driving? Driving culture in different countries around the world. But yeah, when you think of it, it is interesting. And there are some differences.
Because they drive on different sides of the...
That's, of course, one of the most obvious ones. Have you ever driven in another country from your home country?
No, it's very weird because when I'm sitting in the passenger seat, I also feel like it's weird.
Oh, okay.
But I do know that Singapore and Hong Kong, those are the closest countries to Taiwan where people drive on a different side.
Oh, okay, that's true. Singapore, Hong Kong, also Japan. They drive on the same side. And of course, if you go to Europe, it's a bit of a mix. In the UK, they drive on the side like in Singapore and Japan. But in other places, they drive on the other side like we in Taiwan do, or like you might in America or Canada. Now, normally you drive in your own country. It's not a big problem. But if you are going to go on holiday and rent a car in a country where it's all different, it could be kind of confusing.
Kind of weird,
And at that point, as you're trying to figure out how do I turn left and I almost hit that truck, at that time you might ask yourself the title of our article, why do people in some countries drive on the left side of the road? As you're, almost killing yourself for the third time that morning. Because it's driving, you gotta be careful. And if they're doing things in like the opposite way, it's a good question. Why? Let's find out. In many countries, people drive on the right side of the road. However, people in other places drive on the left. Why is this the case? The practice of driving on the left started in Roman times. People mostly rode horses to travel. They stayed on the left in case they met an enemy. Then they could use their right arm to attack. Another reason was for safety. A person usually mounted a horse from the left, so it was safer for riders to mount a horse from the left side of the road instead of the middle. All right, so yes, that is the question. Why do people in some countries drive on the left side of the road? And I guess you could add, and in other countries, they drive on the right side of the road. Yeah, why do they do it in two different ways? What's going on here?
Yeah, let's get started with our article today. In many countries, people drive on the right side of the road, which means the driver is on the left, right?
The driver in the car would be on the left, but if you look at the road, the cars are on the right going this way. And of course, the other side would look the same. Yeah, and of course, there, we don't mean the right, like the correct side of the road. We mean the right, not the left side of the road. Yeah, it's true. In Taiwan, that's the way we do it.
However, people in other places drive on the left. Why is this the case? Which means, why does this happen? I don't get it.
That's right. And of course, when we're talking about driving on the left, you mentioned Hong Kong, Singapore, Japan, and of course, Britain is the place where I think this kind of started, and a lot of countries just copied them back in the day. So yeah, when did all this start? Well, you might think it started with cars, of course, right? I mean, because if you're on a horse, you can't sit on the left or the right of the horse. You're just on the horse. But in cars, you have two chairs, you have two seats, and you have to pick a side. But no, it wasn't cars. It actually says the practice of driving on the left started in Roman times. Yeah, Romans, like Julius Caesar. Julius Caesar did not have a car. He didn't have a truck.
He had a horse.
There were no buses, but they did have horses. So we're talking 2,000 years ago. This is around the time that they started to have these habits. It says people mostly rode horses to travel. Yeah, of course. Rome was famous for its roads. All roads lead to Rome. You could travel from one part of the empire to another in a few days or weeks rather than months or something like that. So most of the travel, or people mostly traveled by road and on horse, of course. Mostly this adverb means 80-90% of the time, or 80-90% of this stuff. It's the biggest number there. It's not all, it's not totally, it's not 100%, but it's very close to that. For example, this room is used mostly as an office, so you can work in here. Occasionally we might have a little party in the office, or we might use it to keep some boxes in, but mostly 8 out of 10 times we're using it as an office.
Okay, so
what about
these
the Romans?
Horses.
Yeah.
The people who were riding these horses, they stayed on the left in case they met an enemy. Then they could use their right arm to attack. So
exactly.
I guess it's because most people are right-handed even back in the day. So that means the most common hand that they would use, their strongest hand was the right one. So they had to be riding on the left so they could attack with their sword or their spear. Another reason was for safety. Interesting.
All right, well that's a really good point. Yeah, exactly. Soldier on a horse, you would be using your right hand, so having it there and having the other person there is much easier than fighting someone across your body like
true.
that. What about this safety idea? Well, let's read on. It says a person usually mounted a horse from the left, so it was safer for riders to mount a horse from the left side of the road instead of the middle. So if here's your horse and you're getting on your horse, you want to be on the side of the road here standing when you get on. You don't want to be standing in the road, because if someone's coming or you fall off the horse, you could get stepped on. So that makes sense. For safety, stay away from where the traffic is, stay on the safe, in this case, the left side of your horse as you get on.
Yeah, so safety is the noun for safe, and when we're riding, when we're having any sort of transportation, driving, safety is very important. This prevents us from getting into accidents. This keeps everybody unharmed so that we're not hurt. We can get from one place to another safely, so safety is important. And there are several things that we need to do for safety. There are rules that we have to follow. So for example, an airplane, for your own safety, put on your seatbelt. That's very important. Before the plane takes off, we always have to wear our seatbelts and follow the rules to make sure that we don't fly out of the seat. And we have rules when we're driving or riding a horse. Every time we're in transportation, we have to really, really be careful so that we maintain our safety.
That's right. And of course, we can also worry about the safety of things. You might lock up your expensive new bicycle for the safety of your bicycle. You don't want someone to steal it. And of course, when you're doing anything with fire or cooking in the kitchen or something like that, safety should still be on your mind. You don't want to get hurt or have other things get damaged or broken or just bad things happening. So safety stops those things from happening, hopefully. Let's take a break and then we'll be back to find out more about why we're driving, where we're driving, and also what we're driving. Horses? I didn't know.
Hello， 大家好，我是 Hanny。在台湾以及许多国家呢，驾驶都是靠道路的右侧行驶。那么在某些国家则是靠道路的左侧行驶。为什么会这样呢？其实靠左边驾驶的这个做法呢，是从古罗马时期开始的哦。当时人们大多是骑马旅行，那他们就会靠左边，以防遇到敌人的时候，他的右手就可以攻击了。这时候麦克老师他提到 warrior。warrior 就是战士、勇士、武士。好，那再我们看到另外一个理由，靠左边行驶的是为了安全。像他们骑马的人呢，通常呢就会从左侧上马嘛。那你从道路的左侧来上马，当然会比较安全咯。如果你待在道路的右侧，那你上马的时候，你就会从马路中间上马，这样很危险嘛。我们来看单字 mostly， 这个副词表示大多、多半或是主要的。那么 safety 是指安全、平安。Rainbow 老师解释的时候用到 unharmed。就是在 harmed 前面加上 un， 后面加上 ed，unharmed 就是没有受伤的。这边一个重点，我们进入文法时间。 好，这边我们来看一下 case 的相关用法。第一个是 the case， 它是指在现实中存在的情形或发生的状况，像是 Why is this the case？ 为什么是这种情况呢？为什么会这样呢？或者是说 That's not the case。并非如此，不是那么一回事。那假设几个妈妈们在聊天，说小孩子在学校都在调皮捣蛋啊，这时候某个妈妈就跳出来说，That's not the case with my son。我儿子并非如此，我儿子才不是这样的。殊不知他就是那种学校的胖虎小霸王那一种。好，再看到第二个用法是 in case 后面接子句呢，它是表达以免怎么样，以防怎么样。子句的动词常常会用简单式，或者是用 should 或者是 might 加原形动词。例如 You'd better take an umbrella with you in case it rains。你最好带把伞，以免下雨喽。好，那接着回到课文中。
In the 1700s, people in the US and France began to transport items in wagons with many horses, and it became common to travel on the right. Drivers would ride the back left horse so that they could use their right hand to whip all the horses. When two wagons passed, drivers kept their wagons to the right. This gave them a better viewing angle to make sure that the wagons didn't hit each other. All right, we are back trying to figure out how this driving on the left, driving on the right stuff all started. Well, so far we've learned it actually goes back to the Romans. So it's way before cars were around. People were even getting on their horses on certain sides, and largely it was because of safety, right? You want to keep people away from getting stepped on by another horse or something like that. And now we jump forward in time quite a long ways. It says in the 1700s, so around 300 years ago, people in the US and France began to transport items in wagons with many horses, and it became common to travel on the right.
Oh, that was
so now we've kind of switched from the going on the left like the Romans did to going on the right. In this case, you can kind of imagine some of those old movies where they're driving the big horse wagon, the horse carriage, and they have maybe 4 horses in front of them or 6 horses in front of them. And so the driver would be sitting on one of those horses, and I guess which one, it all made sense at the time. But let's talk about this word transport.
Transport is to move something or someone from one place to another. So we know the noun transportation usually refers to a car, an airplane, how you get from one place to another. In this case, it refers to a horse. But transport is moving. So we might talk about people transporting items, transporting through shipping or cargo, through big ships or through an airplane. The delivery company transports all sorts of items across the country. So maybe they're a big shipping company, maybe they fly airplanes, maybe they're DHL, and they move things from one place to another.
Absolutely. And one of the ways people used to transport things a long time ago was on the back of a wagon. Just think of a wagon as the old-time version of a truck. We would use a truck today. You wouldn't necessarily put people on it, but you would put boxes on it or whatever stuff you're carrying, put it on your wagon. But kind of like a truck, it would be probably quite long. It would be probably flat that you can put stuff on. It would have 4 wheels. And of course, being a wagon and not a truck, it wouldn't have a motor engine. It would have horses probably pulling it. Maybe out in the countryside, they'd have some bulls or cows or ox pulling your wagon. But this is kind of a slow way of traveling. But for people back then, when they didn't have planes or buses or trains, the wagon was the way a lot of things were moved around by road. For example, the farmer loaded his wagon with fruit and took it to town. He's got his horses. Off he goes to town. No, actually, probably much slower than that. Wagons were famous for being very slow ways of getting around. So let's find out, what would the driver or the guy in charge of the wagon, what would they be doing with their 4 or 6 horses?
Drivers would ride the back left horse so that they could use their right hand to whip all the horses. Again, they probably were right-handed, so they'd be whipping. And to whip means to hit them with a whip. And a whip, it's like a long, maybe it's like a piece of leather or something that you use to hit them. So basically, you know, they wanted to force the horse to move forward. And of course, if you whip somebody, you can't do that anymore. This is not allowed. But back in the day, they did have laws. They did not have laws that prevented people from whipping students. So in Chinese schools, you know, teachers used to whip students' hands if they didn't do very well. But we don't do that nowadays. And we shouldn't do that to animals because animals do feel pain. So horses feel pain, so you shouldn't whip them. So that's something that they did back in the day, but it's less common of a practice nowadays.
Yeah, you might see it in a horse race today.
Probably, yeah.
But not many other places. And also that thing, it could be something quite short that they use to hit the side of the horse, or something quite long. But that actual thing that they use is also called a whip. So you use a whip to whip the animal or something like that. Yeah, I guess that makes sense, because if I was right-handed and I'm on the right horse, I got to whip that horse kind of, and then I'm holding on, I'm steering, that would be difficult. So this way I can whip with one hand, hold the reins and steer, there you go. So here's another reason why being on the back left horse would make sense. When two wagons passed, drivers kept their wagons to the right, the way we drive today in Taiwan. Why? This gave them a better viewing angle to make sure the wagons didn't hit each other.
Okay,
and this
that makes sense.
kind of explains, why car drivers today are still on the left.
Yeah.
We're not on the left horse, we're on the left side of the car. So when you pass someone, you can see how close they are much more easily than if you were far away, looking across your wagon, looking on the other side of the horses or the car. Okay,
that's cool.
It's kind of making sense now. Yeah, I didn't know the history went back so far and had such kind of logical reasons behind it. So there you go. All right, that's all the time we have for today, but we're going to be learning more about why different parts of the world today, in the modern world, without cars or horses and wagons, but with cars and trucks, why we still drive on different sides in different parts of the world. It's going to be interesting. Come back and join us for that. Until then, drive safely.
在18世纪的美国和法国，人们开始用多匹马的马车来运送物品。那驾车的人呢，通常就是骑这个左后方的马，这样他们就可以用右手来鞭打所有的马。当两辆马车要通过的时候呢，驾车的人就会让马车保持在右侧，这样才能有比较好的视角，可以确保这两辆货车是不会相撞的。单字 transport 这个动词表示运送、运输。Rainbow 老师提到 shipping shipping 可以指运送、运输业。下一个单字 wagon 它是指运货马车，4轮的运货马车。再看到 whip 它当名词可以指鞭子，那也可以当动词来表达鞭笞、抽打的那种意思。Mike 老师提到 rain 这个字 R-E-I-N rain 表示缰绳。好，那这边2个重点，我们进入文法时间。好，我们来看重点 so that 它是指以便怎么样，好让怎么样，为的是什么什么，用来引导表示目的的副词子句，这个 that 可以省略。举例来说 The singer disguised himself in a wig and sunglasses so that he wouldn't be recognized。 那位歌手他戴假发又戴墨镜伪装自己，为的是不被认出来。下一个重点是 make sure 加上 that 子句，是表达确保什么什么会发生，那么 that 可以省略。例如 I kept checking my phone to make sure I hadn't missed a text from my friend。 我一直查看手机，确保自己没有漏掉朋友传来的讯息。好，那以上是今天的讲解，同学别走开，马上回来哦。
In many countries, people drive on the right side of the road. However, people in other places drive on the left. Why is this the case? The practice of driving on the left started in Roman times. People mostly rode horses to travel. They stayed on the left in case they met an enemy. Then they could use their right arm to attack. Another reason was for safety. A person usually mounted a horse from the left, so it was safer for riders to mount a horse from the left side of the road instead of the middle. In the 1700s, people in the US and France began to transport items in wagons with many horses, and it became common to travel on the right. Drivers would ride the back left horse so that they could use their right hand to whip all the horses. When two wagons passed, drivers kept their wagons to the right. This gave them a better viewing angle to make sure that the wagons didn't hit each other.
Syuan Forest Park is a public park in the south of Hualien City. The theme of the park is a fairy tale world. Syuan means a lot of wood fuel in Amis. The park used to be a military airport during the Japanese colonial era. It was later turned into a plant nursery and green space. It features a native plant section, a water plant section, and unique greenhouses. Syuan Forest Park is an education and recreational place. A hedge maze and playground are located by the large dragonfly sculpture. In summer, visitors can cool off in its water park for free. Syuan Forest Park is a great place for leisure in all seasons.
See you next time!